how he started and then kept figuring it out, kept shifting, kept making moves. And I hope it inspires you today that if you're sitting, waiting, wondering, doubting, that you can make a start and you can keep on improving and getting better. I want you to hear this episode. Let's go.
Welcome to the Monetize Your Ministry podcast.
And you get a chance to interact with them. To me, that's full-time ministry.
Did I happy because tackle that business is like a feed. It brings in itself and then it opens.
I want to provide content and things that are going to help change lives, and I simultaneously want to receive a blessing from that.
Now here's your host, Kymone Hans.
Welcome back. We have another exciting episode of the Monetize Your Ministry podcast. I'm glad you're watching this. I'm glad you're listening to this. I'm so glad that you are interested in discovering what's your ministry, how you serve others best. You are interested in how to develop that as a business. And then you also want to know how to deploy that thing, how to get it out into the world so you can increase your income and your impact. Listen, if you have not done so already, make sure you go to YouTube. Look up Monetize Your Ministry podcast and subscribe, because you don't want to miss any of these episodes, right? You don't want to miss anything. And if you're a podcast listener, find us on any podcasting platform. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to us there as well. Listen, I've been just so excited about this conversation that we're going to have today. This gentleman right here has been a blessing to me and to my family. When my kids met him, they looked at him as a celebrity, right? And so we want to bring him up today and introduce to some and present to others Robert Kennedy III, RK3. That's him. Welcome to the podcast, Robert.
Hey, man. So glad to be here. So glad to see what you're up to, what you're doing. And I'm, man, so proud of the growth of your business and all the things that I see you putting together, man, from starting from scratch, from being in ministry in the pulpit and making that shift. Dude, that's huge. And I'm proud of the journey that you're on and for your commitment to the journey and how you're blessing others through this, man.
Thank you, man. Thank you. And just know that you are a huge part of this. I remember there was a summer some years ago that my kids were at home, and any parent who has kids that they're home in the summer, they're not at camp or anything, they do a lot of consuming. They're consuming, just videos online and television and all that stuff. And my wife and I had this thought, what about making them like people who are creating something? And you had a course on blogging, and you made that thing available to us. And I had my kids take the course. I took the course, and all of us started blogs because of that. And so I thank you for that. And then you just given so much. You had a program helping people to develop themselves as storytellers and speakers. And I was a part of that. And so I feel like I'm a recipient and I'm someone who's been blessed by your ministry. And I just wanted to bring you on here to thank you as well for what you've done for me and for so many others by just blazing a trail, helping us to get out there and to begin putting our messages out into the world.
Oh, man, you're very welcome. I'm blessed to do that. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, some people may not know you, right? You're a celebrity to my children because when they met you, they're like, that's the guy who helped us with our blogs. But for others, right, who is Robert Kennedy III?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yes,
I'll just state it in this way. I'll approach it from what I do in the business realm. And in the business realm, I work with individuals, real estate professionals, more specifically, teaching them how to speak and communicate with confidence and utilize storytelling as a tool that helps them to connect more effectively with their prospects and their customers. So that's the business side of things. My company is Kinetic Communications. And outside of that, man, I am a dad of 3. I've got a daughter who's a junior in college and a boy that is a senior in high school and another one that's a sophomore. And I am a husband of 1. That's all I can handle. And we've been married. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Sure. So we've been married this year. This August made 23 years for us, man.
Wow.
So
man, you're a few months ahead of me. So
Yeah.
interesting. Like my wife and I, our anniversary is November. So
Yeah.
and we're hitting 23 years. And I
Nice.
also have a college junior. I remember we were both at the same college dropping off our kids for
Yeah.
the first time. And
Yep.
I'm not going to tell everyone that you cried. But no, I know I did. I know
No,
I did.
no,
All right.
no. My wife cried a little bit. We were good. She was good until they had that
Oh
ceremony
yeah.
where they
Ooh,
like
yeah.
their parting ceremony, they call it.
My son was
So
like, they are trying to make us cry. Yeah.
yeah,
So, Robert, there's so many things I know about you and others may know about you, but what's something people who may know you may
yeah,
not know about you?
man. Okay. I think I try to be an open book for the most part. So, people that know me know that I'm a PK, I'm a pastor's kid. I've grown up in church pretty much. People that have known me for a long time know also that I'm a musician, or I've been in the music space, in the music industry. I've played several instruments, written music, produced an album, used to do some stuff in the gospel music space where I got to hang out and interview a lot of the top gospel music artists at the time. And so that was one of my first businesses. But that's the great stuff. What's something crazy that people don't know about? Okay. Most people don't know that I was involved in a police car chase one time.
Hold on. Were you chasing the police? Like that's what
Oh
I want
no.
to know. Were you the
No,
one
no, no. It was
chasing? No,
no,
just
no. No, that was the other direction. It was the other direction. I wasn't I had a brain glitch
Mhm.
moment, and I was probably like 20, 21. You're at those ages, you think you're invincible. And so the grace of God allowed
Yeah.
me to get away
Wow.
that time. Well, no, not that time. I didn't do that again. I didn't do it
Okay.
again. But yeah.
Listen, let's hope the police
If
aren't watching this episode, man. Like
the
that's
statute of limitations has expired, my friend.
like, yo, here, let's come get this dude, man. He's admitting to it right here on this podcast.
Yeah, I didn't rob anything. I was just overtaking someone, and noticed a police on my left side as I was overtaking. I was going too fast. It was a 1-lane road, and I shouldn't have been overtaking at that point. And I was close to work. I was working an overnight shift, and I was close to work, and I don't know, something glitched in my brain. I decided I wasn't going to stop, and so yeah.
Well, that sounds like your life, like all brakes, all gas, no brakes, right? So that's the next book. So Robert, you mentioned something that I want to start with. You said you're a PK, so you're a pastor's kid, which means church had a huge shaping on your life. You were allowed to explore your gifts. Like, what was, as you now reflect backwards, what were some of the things that you were able to take from that world that have helped to shape the work that you've done outside of that, right, in the marketplace?
Wow. I would say church was where I had my first public speaking opportunity.
Okay.
I was probably about 8 or so when I was asked to preach a sermon, my first sermon as a part of Children's Day. And church was the first place that I got to play piano in public. And my parents had this singing group in New York, and I was able to play for their group. I'm like 10, 11 years old playing for this adult group. And it was just a place that I was able to hone a lot of gifts and skills. And I wasn't a extroverted kid. I wasn't a kid that talked a lot and was out front. I was reserved in a lot of spaces. I did speak with friends. I had friends and I hung out with them. We laughed and we joked. But the kid that was out front, that was always raising their hand and always being loud, and you knew they were there, that wasn't me. I was a little bit reserved. So to be on stage, to be out front speaking, to be on stage singing solos, to be on stage playing, was that church gave me the opportunity to do that. And maybe I should even back up and say, not just that church gave it to me, being a pastor's kid implored it upon me.
Yes, that's a very good way to put that, right? Like you didn't volunteer. Sometimes you were volunteer.
Not exactly. No.
Yeah.
No.
Interesting.
But I mean, the good thing is that there were some kids that may have been able to grow differently or expose differently if they had opportunities. I was just gifted, and I'll say it this way, I was gifted opportunities
Mhm.
because of the position, and I'll even say it this way, because of the privilege that I had as a
Yeah.
pastor's kid.
Yeah. Did you look at it that way back then?
No, no, no. I want people to leave me alone. I want why y'all choosing me? I wanted to hide behind the curtain. I wanted to just be regular. Yeah,
Mm.
but yeah, so the good and the bad that came with it. The good was, yeah, you got noticed, you got asked to do things, were given opportunities to do things. The other piece of it is, yeah, people had certain expectations, a lot of times unrealistic expectations, and sometimes even threatened your behavior based on who you
Yeah.
were. Yeah, what you mean you're doing that? You're the pastor's kid. You should know better. We're gonna tell your
Yeah.
father. We're gonna tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. 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 Oh, there's so many horror stories I've heard of that. And myself, just being honest, I
yeah,
raised three PKs, and I never
yeah,
wanted them to feel that pressure. I'm sure, even if we didn't, as their
yeah,
parents, I'm sure it probably came from other spaces and places.
yeah.
But just hearing your story, like there's exposure, right? There's the opportunities, and even opportunities that where you were in places you weren't comfortable sounded
Mhm.
like they helped you to like discover something about yourself that you would
Yeah,
not have known if you weren't put in those uncomfortable situations.
absolutely, absolutely. I think there's even further than that, being a PK at a church, and then my dad after that moving into conference work and traveling a bit. Some of the relationships that I have now, some of the spaces that I'm able to sit in now are because of relationships that were formed, or just being able to navigate some of those spaces. And some people that I know, oh, your parent was this, or oh, yeah, y'all went to that church and you did this. And I was able to form greater networks
Mhm.
because of being in, the pastoral ministry with my family.
Yeah. Now, Robert, I don't know if you've been asked this question. I know you
Mhm.
probably have. You're a speaker, right? And
Yep.
you speak. So why didn't you become a pastor?
You know what? So I get asked that regularly, and as
Right.
a matter of fact, one time I moved from Massachusetts to the state of Maryland, and I was on stage doing something. I was actually either leading a song or leading praise and worship or whatever. And so as I lead praise and worship, I'm exhorting. I'm, kind of transitioning between the songs and those types of things. And several times people said to me, "Oh my gosh, you missed your calling." I said, "What you
Mm.
talking about?" They said, "Oh, you should have been a pastor." I said, "No, I don't know. I never felt called to pastoring." Um, so and I may need to create a caveat around that. I will say that God speaks to me regularly, and there are times where, because of how I operate at my church, there are people that call me pastor. Like every week, there are people. I'm greeting people, or I'm doing something, or I want to create connection with people. I never want people to say that they came either to my church or to my space, and I was around and they didn't get greeted or they weren't connected with. And so I have really taken on that as a ministry to make sure that I connect with people, and not just kind of the handshake, hey, how you doing, and then I go to the next person. It's the slow down 1 second, say handshake, hey, how was your week? What made you smile this week? What was something challenging that happened to you this week? Tell me.
Wow.
So you want to take some time and space with people who are there, and who may have come for the first time, or may have been there for the 15th time but have never been noticed previously.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I do, and how I operate, and maybe that's pastoral.
Yeah.
But I've
Well,
never felt the call of God to say, hey, you need to go to seminary and then work for a conference.
yeah. Well, Robert, as you just said, I had a eureka moment, right? And
Mhm,
this eureka moment might be one you've heard before about yourself.
mhm.
But it's like you create connections. That's what you do, right?
Mm,
And that's your ministry.
yeah,
And people see that in the church space. And what we traditionally do when we see someone involved in ministry in the church space is we think you need to be a pastor because
yeah,
ministry equal pastoring, right? But
yeah,
in the work in us being online, right? The first time we met was 3 years ago when our kids were, being dropped off. But I
yeah,
felt so connected to you because I've been in spaces where you've made connections. You've
Yeah.
connected with me, you've connected me with others, you created a group for connection, and just even seeing how you are in sharing and speaking online, you're a connector. And I feel like God has given you that ministry of connection. I don't know if you've ever heard that, thought about that, or you can just say, no, that's not true.
You know, I think people have said it sometime, and whether it's a gift or not, I think at some point it was just something that I intentionally decided to do. When I first started speaking, one of the things that when I first started to run my businesses, one of the things that happened was, if you're going to grow a business, people say you've got to go to these networking sessions, and you got to go to these networking events. And as a, I don't always like labels, but I do claim the one of introvert, right? Because that it accurately describes my energy levels and how I operate in spaces. And as an introvert, I would absolutely hate going to these network events. I would go in to a networking event because I felt like I had to, but I would find the bathroom, I'd get food, stuff it in my mouth, and stay in a corner so I wouldn't have to talk to people, and and then leave and feel like a jerk because I wasted like an hour driving to this space and then stayed for 20 minutes.
Right.
Because that wasn't my thing. But I started to recognize that, you know what? It's not even about the energy. And I could go to a space where there are 100 people, but do I need to meet and know all 100 of them? Or would it be just as valuable if I made connection with one?
That's the
And
word.
so I would go and say, you know what, let me make connection with 5 people tonight. And once I've made my connection with 5 people, that's my quota.
Yeah.
I'm out. I'm leaving. And I would start to talk about connection. And a lot of the things, people would ask me questions about, hey, how do you handle networking as a business owner? And I would start to talk about connection. And I actually had a talk that was called, I forgot, Smurf Your Way to a Better Connection. And I had an acronym for Smurf. I forgot what it was. I have to go back to the PowerPoint. But so it's been there in one way or another, not necessarily as me teaching it to people, but maybe as a coping mechanism for me in the beginning to be able to navigate the spaces that I needed to navigate in order to create the business growth that I needed in order to support my family and to help pour into the lives of others.
Yeah. Our guest today is Robert Kennedy III, RK3. And so, Robert, talk to us about you have, like, how do we get into business? Like, where does that story begin?
Man, so I don't know exactly where it began. So I think you, like myself, have a Caribbean or West Indian background.
Yes.
And so growing up in that space, and maybe this is even true for North American or African Americans on the mainland here, when you're growing up as a kid, there are certain careers that are acceptable.
Yeah.
And so, there's a doctor, there's a
lawyer,
teacher, there's a nurse, maybe a lawyer. When I was a kid, I heard lawyers are liars, so I don't know if that was acceptable. But so there were the acceptable careers. But when we thought of business, it was always the people that had the little shop on the corner. We didn't know about business being, in other spaces. We didn't know about service-based businesses. We didn't know about coaching. We didn't know about any of that stuff. Coaching maybe didn't exist in the same way back then.
Yeah.
Right. But as a kid, my dad, one of the things that he would do sometimes is in the summer when we were out of school, he'd be like, you boys, you go sell peanuts. And he would buy these cans and he would tell me and my brothers to go sell peanuts to people, either at the church or whatever. And he got that because when he was in college, how he paid his way through college was being a call porter. And so yeah, so selling books. And so that call porter ministry, he was kind of like, okay, yep, you've got to have that sales instinct. You've got to be able to influence people in some way. And so he shared those things with us, but he never really said, hey, being an entrepreneur is a thing. Hey, here are some business ideas. He just said, hey, go sell peanuts. All right. And so we grew up we got jobs. I started out in the mental health industry, spent about 2 or 3 years there, and then I became a teacher. But while I was doing both of those things, I found out that I really wasn't a great employee. Because I wanted to have a say, or I wanted to have an impact. And in order to do that, in the corporate space or in the education space, you got to run things up the chain. You got to wait for this committee to meet. You got to wait for the principal to approve this. You got to wait for the
You
administration.
gotta wait your time to get to those levels to have that kind
Brother.
of say.
Yeah. So, I knew that even in those, when I was teaching, I wasn't going to be there long term. And while I was teaching, my wife and I had a conversation. We were in our bedroom doing that thing that married couples do in the bedroom, the budget, right? And so, yeah.
I was like, where are we going? Where are we going? Right.
Yeah. So we were doing our budget, and she was like, dude, you're spending too much money on CDs, right? And so I remember at the time I was a musician. I had group, and so I had to be aware of what was up.
Yes,
so I needed all the latest CDs.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I begrudgingly said, oh my gosh, I can't get my CDs. Our budget just can't handle it. But I had to figure out how to get CDs. And so I don't remember how I figured it out at the time, but I found out that I could call or connect with the A&R representatives at record companies and call the PR companies, tell them that I want to interview their artists, and they would send me free CDs. So I called up an A&R representative. I was like, hey, I'd like to interview your artist. And they were like, okay, cool. What's your website? And I said, give me a couple of days. The website, we're doing some updates or whatever, and then I'll call you back.
We're doing some updates. I love it.
Didn't have a website, didn't know about websites. So I got some books, and I learned HTML in 2 days, and put up a website and put on the website some reviews of CDs that I already had. And then I called them back and was like, hey, here's the website. And I started to share it with them. They were like, okay, cool. And they started sending me CDs. So I'm like, okay, cool. A friend of mine was like, hey, dude, I've got an internet radio station. What if we merged our efforts? I was like, okay, cool. So we merged our efforts. Site traffic went through the roof. And we started to have these record companies and companies call and saying, hey, can we put ads on your radio station? Can we put ads on your website? I said, okay. And so they started doing these things. So then we started interviewing or getting independent artists calling us and saying, hey, can we get interviewed on your show or on your radio station or on your website? I'm like, cool. I said, what's your website? They're like, oh, we don't have one. I said, ding, ding, ding. I learned how to build a website. I can build yours. And so I called up my brothers. One of them he was good at graphic design. The other one was working for IBM at the time and was great with programming stuff. I was like, yo, let's put this together. Let's make some money. And we started building websites for independent artists. So, yeah,
this is the story. This is the story you should have told earlier too, man.
Oh, you didn't like the police chase?
I didn't know. I like the police chase, but I didn't know that you did websites.
Yeah. So I mean, so that experience was like, okay, so I can make money without having to ask anybody's permission, without waiting for somebody else, and I can get free CDs on top of all that. So that, I mean, I was working full-time still as a teacher at the time, but there was this bug, this thing that was just the seed that was planted inside of me. And so after that, man, I was teaching online for a university, and I moved to the state of Maryland, and I got let go from that teaching job. And I started to search for other jobs, started to interview for other jobs. And I wasn't getting any callbacks. Had 3 kids under the age of 5, wasn't getting no callbacks. And I need to provide and contribute to my household. And so I found a lady that was teaching at a university, and she was asking me to build, or she needed an online course built from her content. So I said, okay, cool, I can do that. I built one. She paid me like $1,500. And then she said, hey, I got 3 more. I said, okay, cool. And I started to do that. And after I did about, 7, 8, 9 of these and got some other little freelance gigs, I said, wait a minute. I can do more. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I formed my company. So I formed an e-learning company, and we were building online courses. And that was the first business that I was in full time, 100%.
Wow.
And so we were building online courses. I hired some contractors, and we were building online courses for companies, and in some cases websites for some companies that asked us for that. So it's been a journey, man.
Man, what a journey. What a journey.
Yeah.
And we I know there's some more like detours and
Yeah.
shifts, but this is there is something that as I listen to you, it almost feels like it goes against conventional wisdom, right? And I'll tell you what that is.
Yeah.
Like conventional
Mhm.
wisdom says pick your thing, narrow things down, be real narrow and stuff at the beginning. And I believe
Yeah.
in niching down, I believe in targeting, I believe in focusing. And so that's not what I'm
Yeah.
saying. But it sounds like you are being open to what am I hearing, what am I seeing as needs in the market,
Yeah.
and what can I figure out in terms of how I
Yeah.
can meet that need. Like you didn't, so when the person came to you, let's say you were building websites and the lady
Mhm.
said I need the help with the course creation, whatever, you didn't say no, I'm not doing that, I'm over here. It seemed like you were just like keeping yourself open at that stage to let me see what are some of the things that are out here. So I don't know what your thoughts on that. Just I feel like
Well,
maybe for some people you need to be more open at the beginning.
I would like to say that it was that thoughtful, but bruh, I needed money.
Right.
Right. And so um, I needed money, and here was this skill that I had
What was
that
the
I could
skill?
use to
What was
make
the skill?
some money. I was a teacher
Right.
prior to that, remember? So
Right.
I had the skill of being able to put together educational content.
Right.
I had the skill of building websites. So
Right.
I knew how to put online assets together. I was able to build, I used as a teacher, I would teach my kids PowerPoint, those types of things. So I knew how to put all of these different things together. And so now it was simply a matter of taking all of that stuff and then being able to situate it in an online platform.
Yeah.
And
It
so
almost
I'm
feels like
putting
you
it
had the
together in a
ability.
way that was palatable.
It almost feels like you have the ability to figure something out, right? Like,
Mhm.
you know what? I said yes. You know what? This is what you need. You need a website. Let me go figure this thing out. And it just
Yeah.
seems like that ability to figure things out is what allows you to get started in those.
So let me share this with you. So when I was in high school, I took a career inventory
Mhm.
exam. And those career inventory, for those of you that aren't familiar with them, it's to kind of give kids some example of some ideas about maybe some careers that they might have aptitude for. My career inventory said two things. It said I would have aptitude for a career in communications or electrical engineering.
Hmm.
Right. And so you're kind of like, what? That doesn't connect. What does so? But here it is. Here's how it connects. My mind works in this way where number one, I've always had a gift for communicating, whether that be writing poetry, whether that be writing music. I'm good as a writer. My family still thinks I'm the only writing editor in the house. They ask me about emails and all sorts of stuff, right? So communication has always been a skill. But I also think in a very structured way. I'm able to pull things apart and pull them together. As a kid, I will pull apart radios and try to put them back together.
Mhm.
Right. So my mind is I'm not good. I'm not the person that you want to work at something long term.
Mm.
But if you're like, listen, we need to kick something off and we need it to be organized and we need to be structured. We need to recognize the resources and the skills or the talents that we need to make it happen. Cool. Let's put it. That's not possible to do, Robert. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's try it this way. Right.
Yeah.
That's how my brain works. And so I think when people are struggling with how something works or something comes together, in my mind, it's like very easy. My wife literally several years ago would come to me and say, "Hey, babe, can you research this thing online for me?" I'm like, "Babe, you've got the same Google that I do. Just Google it." And she's like, "No, you Google different than I do." I said, "What? What you talking about?" And so one day I said, just go ahead and do it. And I sat down and I watched her. And sure enough, she was searching for something and she put in some terms to Google this thing. And I was like, "Why'd you do that? Do this, then this, and put these words in." And when I did that, the word popped up on the links that she needed, or the results that she needed, popped up on screen. And it just made me realize, dude, your mind just operates differently than some other people. I mean, I think everybody's mind operates different. I think it just, yeah, there's just some things I'm able to organize and synthesize and assimilate some things in a certain way that just makes sense to me.
You know, that's so important what you just said. Your mind operates differently. And I think for everyone listening to this, one of the things we want to just highlight on this podcast is the uniqueness of every person. And that uniqueness is not your disadvantage as much as it is your advantage, right? It's the thing, it's what's already been put inside of you. Came here, God put that inside of you, the way you think, Robert, the way that others that you're watching this and listening to this, you think a certain way. And sometimes we want to think the way and operate the way that others do. And what we don't realize is if we just embrace, man, this is who I am. I figure things out this way. I process things this way. I look at things this way. If we would appreciate that, we could build businesses, ministries, just our careers off of our advantages and stop looking at it as a disadvantage.
Yeah. I want to back up to something that you asked earlier when you asked about is the wisdom in choosing a lane or niching down at the beginning, and me just being open. It wasn't so much that I was open. It was, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Right. I wasn't clear. And so one of the things that a lot of business owners may want to admit is that at the beginning, it's very hard to know what to niche down to do. It's very hard to know exactly what you want to do, how you want to serve the world, how you can utilize the gifts that you may not even be 100% certain about yet in order to create something that can generate revenue or, transform lives or create products or whatever. And that's okay. That's okay. So you're going to meet gurus who tell you to do all of this stuff, but it's not so much that you're doing it wrong. Sometimes you've got to go through a process in order for you to make sense of the things or the little things or the little pieces that were in your life. It's kind of like your life is these. Sometimes people get scared of being broken, but those little fragments, right? When you're broken, those little fragments are what allow you to make sense of the puzzle, and you kind of are able to put them back together, and you kind of are able to see things. But sometimes when it's whole, we don't really understand it, and we just take it for granted because there's no reason for us to understand anything else outside of that. Right. Yeah. It's like looking at the picture on the top of the puzzle box. When you see the picture, there's no reason for you to understand anything else about it, but you open up the box and everything else is in pieces. Now it makes sense. Okay. Yeah, these are broken pieces, but there's this picture. Let me see if I can put this together. Right. And now you understand how you can put it together because you've got some sense or you've got the context of the picture. But before you open the box, you didn't know you needed to do anything with the picture.
That's right. I love that. Such a great perspective. Our guest, Robert Kennedy. So Robert Kennedy III. So Robert, now you started this e-learning business. Yeah. When do we get to speaking? Like when do we get to that? Like, and maybe you want to take us through the jumps, but I remember speaking and communicating, that being the thing that you were leveraging.
Yeah. So I was doing this e-learning company, and essentially, after a little while, people started to ask me to teach them stuff. So I got a call from a company and they were like, hey, we see that you're using this specific software to build e-learning. Can you come teach for us and teach other companies how to build their courses using this software? As a matter of fact, the very first book that I wrote was as a result of that. I got a call from a publishing company in London. And they said, hey, your name was referred to us as someone who teaches this software. Can you help? Can you write a book on this software and how to build courses using this software? So I was doing that. And as I began to teach people how to do this, the people who I was teaching began to ask me questions like, are you a speaker? Because every time I taught, I didn't just teach the software. I always had something inspirational or something fun or something that made people think a little bit just outside of the technical nature of the software. And so they started to ask, hey, are you a speaker? And I'm like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. So after a while, I began to recognize that I wasn't just teaching people how to build courses. When they brought information to me, I would look at it and say, wait a minute, if you give it to people in that format, it's going to overwhelm them. They're not going to make sense of it. They're not going to understand it, and they're just going to page turn. And so I started to say, okay, let's break it apart and let's pull it this way. Let's create some stories and let's create some scenarios and let's see if you can build this, and then that'll increase your engagement rates with your organization or the employees that are taking these courses. And I realized I was essentially teaching people how to communicate their ideas more effectively in an online space. And so I began to do that more. People started to ask me to teach, and eventually I started to get asked to do leadership training, and I started to do more of that. And then I really leaned back into the communication space because I discovered that was the thing that I really enjoyed. And the more that I did that, people kept asking the question, hey, are you a professional speaker? Are you a motivational speaker? I'm like, what are you talking about? So I kept getting asked the question until I decided I was going to find out what this speaking thing is, this paid professional speaking thing is. And I found an organization called the National Speakers Association and started to stalk them for about 1.5 years online. And then ultimately in 2017 became a member. And they really have played a central part in teaching me how to grow a speaking business that is sustainable.
Wow. So it's interesting, Robert. I mean, look, this is a fascinating conversation for me because
Yeah.
you would think that more of these things are more planned, they're more scripted. It's you listening to what are people asking me, you're listening to the questions that people are saying to you and moving based on, hey, are you a speaker? So just getting that feedback, and then I
Yeah.
mean, it's coming out again, right? The way you think in terms of how you break things down is the same approach you were taking to a field, and people now seeing that approach saying, man, you should be speaking in other spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it was also, I was in this space of personal growth and development. So I was reading, I was like devouring books. And as I'm doing that, I'm seeing these different things, I'm hearing these different things, and I'm also looking at what some of my natural gifts are, the things that draw my interest. And so I noticed that leadership books kind of drew me. I was big into reading John Maxwell books and those types of things. And so as I found interest in those things, I started to lean towards those and speak about those, or look for opportunities to teach or speak about those things as well. And so one of the ways, if anybody asks me how you can figure out what you're interested in, you're not going to be able to do it just sitting at home.
Yeah.
You've got to consume information. You've got to grow yourself. You've got to read. You've got to figure out what draws your attention. And when you start to find that out, if you start to notice some common threads, then begin to lean into that and find out what is it about that thing that interests you? What is it about that thing that attracts you or draws your or incorporates your gift in some way? And then begin to find out about that as much as you can.
Yeah, I love it. So it sounds like exposure helps us to tap into what we're interested in, right? We need some exposure and some experiment. Now, Robert, there's a saying I used to hear you say, your story
Deserves a stage.
deserves a stage. It's like give us the whole thing because I don't want to mess it up. You tell it to us.
Oh,
You
well,
say
I
it
used to
better.
have this podcast, and I would say everything that happens to you in life is your stuff is your story, and your story deserves a stage. And that was because people, the more that I created online groups and the more that I connected with people in community, I started to recognize that people were not doing certain things because of fear. And people would look at me and they would say, oh my gosh, you seem so confident on stage, or you seem so comfortable talking to people. And I was like, nah, dude, I'm scared out of my wits. What are you talking about? And so I recognized that people are looking at me and thinking, oh my gosh, she's got it all together. And I started to say, well, what if they knew that I didn't have it all together? What if they started to hear some of the mistakes or some of the mess ups or
Mhm,
some of the
mhm,
flops
mhm.
that I've had. And so as I started to share some of those things, people started to say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you shared that. I was feeling this way, or I
Yeah,
was fearing this, or I thought that I would never be able to because I was too old, or whatever it was."
yeah,
And so I said to people, "Listen, each of us has, while we're here on earth, we each have a unique journey, and nobody else is going to be on the exact journey that you're on. However, your journey may be a blueprint to help somebody else navigate theirs. So as you go through your stuff, typically what happens in life, we all look for mentors, or we all look for people, we read books, whatever it is, because we're looking for some information, some way to navigate things. And when you begin to share your story with people, even if it's negative, you might have gone through something that's bad and you're like, "Oh, this is embarrassing. I don't want to go through, I don't want to share that." But you begin to share that, and there's somebody else who was cowering in a corner that
mm,
sees you were brave and courageous enough and vulnerable enough to share that. They're kind of like, "Oh my gosh, well, if
yeah,
Kymone can share that,"
yeah,
um, or if that's what Kymone went through, or that's how Kymone navigated that, then okay, maybe I can try that too, and maybe I might be able to navigate it as well.
yeah, yeah. Your stuff is your story. Your story deserves a stage.
Yeah,
Now, um, I want to talk about what you're doing now, but there's something that hit me as you were talking about this, and
yeah.
it's, are you still okay? So let me ask you this: are you still building websites?
No, 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 no. I don't want to do that no more.
All right.
No, I mean
Are you?
the language. I mean, if push came to shove,
Yeah.
I still could. I mean, I still, if I need to do something, I'll still jump in and dabble in a WordPress website if
Yeah.
I need to.
Right.
But no, I don't want to do
That
that.
you're not doing that as a business. How about,
No.
are you still doing setting up learning platforms and courses and stuff?
Not exactly. So I do have online courses that I offer, and so I do share. I do upload things. I know about learning management systems, and a lot of times people ask me, "Hey, how do I release an online course?" And so my master's is in instructional technology and instructional design. And so I've got that in addition to my teaching and the online course company that allows me to share with people, "Hey, here are some things that you can do to make a course that is sensible, that is accessible for people." And so yeah, the e-learning stuff still comes in useful, but no, I'm not doing that as a product or service.
Right. And then like they're teaching people to blog. It's interesting. I guess what I wanted to say is there's some things that you realize, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore, and I'm
Mhm.
shifting and I'm shifting. But it's interesting in your answer. It sounds like you still take a piece of that and some
Oh yeah,
learning from that and some principles
absolutely.
from that. But it's one knowing, how do I know when to shift from one thing to the next? Now, what would you say to someone like how you've made these shifts?
You know, I don't have a neat answer for that. I don't
Mm,
know
mm.
how people know how to shift from one thing to the next. I'll tell you how I know.
Give me that.
And this comes from the space of spirituality. Um, God speaks to me in a certain way. When I reach a space where I'm capping out, and no matter what efforts I do, it won't bear fruit in that space. I begin to say, "Okay, God, what is it that you want me to do next? What, or how do you want me to take the learning of this season and
Mhm.
apply it into the next space?"
Yeah, yeah.
And
Okay.
so I try to listen to the promptings. I really try to lean into what God is saying to me. And I don't know where God speaks to people. He speaks to me in the shower, right? So I'm in the shower and the water is dripping down my bald head, and I'm just and the thoughts are clear.
Yeah.
I'm just that's I would say almost every business idea that I have comes while I'm in the shower, or if there's a particular business problem that I'm struggling with and I don't have any, it comes in the shower. You know, either then or sometimes when I'm up early in the morning at 4 a.m. or whatever, I might hear things. But the shower seems to be this space where God, I don't always talk to God in the shower, but
He
it's
wants to
where I
hear.
hear him the clearest.
Yeah. So, Robert, I've been on your email list for
Mhm.
years, right? I've been on your email list for years. Maybe it's when I did the course. I don't know. You're one of the first people I knew that was like sending out emails. Like, what is this? Like, you could do this to people, right? Like, this
Yeah.
is not just big companies. And just recently, I was like, he is saying real estate agents. I was like, this is different. And by the way, I'm still on the list, so just know that
Mhm.
I'm not getting off, right? I'm
You
not.
can't get rid of me.
Don't kick
Yeah.
me off. Don't kick me off. But tell
Yeah.
me this: when did you make that shift? Like, what made you lean into
Yeah.
this? And it almost feels like there's a narrowing, a niching down a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. So, my life is just when I talk about it, I realize all of the different juicy details that I
Yeah.
sometimes leave out when I'm talking to people. So after I started the online music promotions website company, after I did the web development company, I became a real estate agent. And the reason for that was my wife, we had our daughter, and my wife was home, and I was a teacher at the time. And after about a year and a half, one day I came home and my wife was kind of curled up in the bed, and her and the baby were there, like in the same place that I left them in the morning. And I was like, "What's up, babe?" And she said, "Babe, I want to go back to work. I just feel like so unproductive." I said, "Okay, cool. But we've got this baby. We're not at a space where we can afford childcare. What do we need to do?" She was like, "I don't know." So, we prayed about it. She went back to work, and I decided that I was going to go back to school. But while I was in school, I decided I was going to study for my real estate exam and became a real estate agent because I'd had an interest in real estate at some point. And so I said, "Yeah, let me figure this out." And so I became a real estate agent. I was a real estate agent in the state of Massachusetts for 5 years, from 2004 to 2008. We moved to Maryland in 2008, and I did not take my real estate license with me because it wasn't reciprocal, and the requirements for Maryland were a lot more stringent. Well, for
Mhm.
example, 24-hour pre-licensing in Massachusetts, 60 hours in Maryland. I also didn't know a lot of people, so I didn't have the um, network to say, "Yeah, I'm going to start a real estate business," as we just moved. So I
Mm.
didn't do that. But about a year and a half ago, I started to feel that prompting again. You should get your real estate license. You should check out real estate license. And so I just started to think about it, and then I said, "Okay, cool." Bit the bullet, said I'm going to do my pre-licensing. I did that. But then I started to think and say, "Wait a minute. Well, if you get this real estate license, I mean, what are you going to do with it exactly? Do you want to become an agent? Do you want this to be your side hustle, or, why are you doing this?" So my initial thought was I wanted to do it for investment purposes, but I started to think, wait a minute, you speak in the communication space, you do business storytelling, you do
Mhm.
presentation skills and speaking. That's something that real estate agents use also. So instead of working and then coming home and saying, "Let me put on my real estate hat," why not do what you do now in the real estate industry? Because before I had been doing it across all of corporate. And now I said, I've taken the same topic. Let me just do it for one industry. And on top of that, I'll have this license, which provides me an additional layer of credibility in the industry. I was an agent before. So let's just merge them and do them in this one space. And the beauty that started to happen after that was, as I speak to my team about how we market or how we who we reach out to get speaking gigs, etc., it's much easier because they
Wow.
only have to look in one space.
Wow. Isn't that counterintuitive, right? It's like we think the more I have, the easier. But it's like just knowing this one space, it makes it easier. You know what to say yes to, you know what to say no to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I don't always say no. I mean, there's people that still outside of the real estate space hire me, and I'll say yes. But I'm not marketing to them.
Yeah.
That's based on previous relationships, or that's based on them seeing me speak in the real estate space. I'm like, I don't care if he's not right industry. I want to hear him speak. Right. And so that's some of that is me working my best at being the best or being great in what I do, no matter where I am. And some of that is me now saying, I'm just going to aim at this one circle instead of the entire doggone target.
Yeah. I love it. All right, Robert, I want to get you out on this. You got to give us a tip. You got to give us, somebody's in business now, trying to grow, maybe somebody who's looking to get started. You can pick whoever the audience is. Give us a tip from your decades now of business experience and varied experience. What's the tip you leave with us?
Man, that is a big question.
It is.
I think the biggest thing that I would think about is knowing in business what are your $10 per hour activities and what are your $10,000 per hour activities. There are some things that you find yourself doing, especially early on in business, that because you can do it, you find yourself doing it, and you feel like you've got to do all of these things on your own. But how much is that activity worth? Is it worth my time to build my own website? Is it worth my time to answer all of my emails? Is it worth my time to schedule all of my calls on my calendar? Is it worth my time to organize all of my files in my Dropbox? Or am I best served being the creative mind, being the strategic mind, doing the things that only I can do and selling that?
That's good, Robert. That's good. Wow. All right, Robert, somebody wants to connect with you, wants to follow you, learn from you, bring you in to speak, right? Tell us how we can connect with RK3.
Easiest way, get in touch with RK3.com. Everything's there. You've got all the socials, the number, everything that you need. Just go to getintouchwithrk3.com.
Oh, is it? Yep. So I have the wrong thing?
Yep. So that's the last part. It's getintouchwithrk3.com.
Okay. Get in touch with, and the same number 3, right?
Yep.
Okay. Did we ever have that as the website? Do we shift things? Or am I missing that?
No, that's kind of like my everything page. So my speaking website is robertkennedy3.com. My business page, my company page is kineticommunications.com. But, as you think about everything that I do, all of the different social media channels, etc., that's the everything page. Everything is there.
Everything is at get in touch with. Is this right?
Yep. Get in touch with RK3.com.
All right. Look, you made that easy. I didn't have to get all the socials and all that kind of stuff.
Nope.
Go one place.
Nope.
Get in touch.
Yep.
You tell this guy is into communication, right? He knows how to make Robert, I've appreciated this. I want to thank you again for blazing the trail for myself and others, just kind of showing us that as just taking the things that we have, who we are, our expertise, we can take what we have out into the marketplace. And I hope that you've been inspired as you've heard this conversation, as you've watched this interview. I just want to encourage you, don't just be inspired. Take action on what you've learned here today. Take your ministry, take your ideas, and move them out into the world and increase your income and your impact.
Thank you for listening to the Monetize Your Ministry podcast with Kymone Hines. For more information, visit our website at www.monetizeyourministrypodcast.com. That's www.monetizeyourministrypodcast.com. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Please share this episode with someone who needs it. Let's increase our income and impact.